So for whatever reason, I want to play SMT5 the whole way through without fusing any demons. For a challenge like this, we're probably going to have to lay out some ground rules, so let's get those out of the way right now. You know, originally this rule section was a few minutes long. Quite frankly, I think it's boring, so I'm going to throw them up on the screen. If you care, look at them. If you don't, don't. If you're a perceptive individual, you might realize at the beginning of this video we're playing on hard mode. Part of the way in, I switch it to normal mode, because it's my playthrough and I'll do what I want. So, as per usual at SMT5, we start out the game in a high school. Things are ominous, things are a little bit scary. What's going on? Let's talk to our classmates and see if anybody wants to walk home with us. Unfortunately for us, our antisocial classmates want nothing to do with us. However, we are in luck because the main characters are a different story. I think it's fine for the most part to skip these character introductions, mostly because the game itself doesn't really develop them in any serious way. We go to a train station, we leave the train station, we walk around, we go to a tunnel, the tunnel collapses, everything's gone to shit. The apocalypse has happened. Or has it? And before we know it, one of our friends with questionable wardrobe choices gets carried away by an angel. Naturally, our protagonist starts to walk out into the desert, and eventually forms a bond with a man named Aogami, or at least, he looks like a man. We're not really sure yet. We go through the tutorial battle. It teaches us how to play the game, if we need to know how, and then Aogami explains that we have become a being known as the Naho Bino. Yep, we're the main character now. And with that, we're pretty much caught up, and we can get into the playthrough. Our good friend Aogami recommends that we head to Tokyo Tower first. He seems to have lost some of his memories, and maybe that'll jog his memory. So, why not? Being that the world we knew as Tokyo previously is just a desert now, that seems like a good place to start. Before too long, we meet our good old boy Gustav. He'll be selling us items for the rest of our playthrough, so he'll be very important. Items are very good in this game. Our first demon negotiation with Pixie goes very well because the game doesn't let us fail, even if we try. From there, I thought it would be a smart idea to get another party member, so a slime is the nearest one to us. Let's get one. It's at this point I start running around and actually trying to get everything in the area that I can. In this playthrough, we really won't be showing everything that I end up doing, but I'll show most of the important stuff, obviously mini-bosses, boss fights, anything that I think is notable along the way, I will be showing. After grabbing treasures, relics, side quests, everything you can name in the area, some mistakes were made and we do end up dying a few times. But that's no big deal, and we push onwards to the next ley line fountain. Before we go and do that, we do have to help out our girl, Amana Zako, from getting eaten, I guess. The Pretas the game puts you up against in this fight are extraordinarily weak. They're like level 1, so it's pretty hard to lose, honestly. We tell Amana Zako that she's annoying, she calls us annoying, and we continue on our way to the next Leyland Fountain. It's here where we finally meet Sophia, probably not that useful of an NPC comparatively to a normal run. Normally, this is where you would be fusing demons together and really having the experience, the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of the SMT formula, which is fusing demons, which we aren't doing in this playthrough. However, there is one thing that Sophia will be very useful for in this playthrough, and that is using miracles, because while we can't fuse demons, we most certainly can use miracles. If you're not familiar with how SMT5 works, think of miracles as sort of the app points or the apps in this game. They just basically upgrade your character in different ways over the course of the game. You unlock more of these by destroying abscesses, which we're about to actually go and fight pretty soon here. So we grab some of the more cheap miracles, just ones that do some pretty basic stuff for our character. We'll definitely be grabbing some more important ones later on. Also, while I didn't mention this at the beginning, Essence Fusion will be fair game in this playthrough. There's a myriad of reasons why this has to be the case. One reason is that your character in this game learns moves specifically through essences. He does not learn them by leveling up or really in any other way. If we didn't use Essence Fusion in this game, our main character would have a singular lightning spell, and that's it. Nothing else. It was at this point I also kind of had the debate with myself whether or not my actual demons should be able to use essences. And what I came to a conclusion on is that they should be able to. If our main character is, why can't they? The main thing about this playthrough is no demon fusion. Essence fusion is very SMT5 centric thing, so I don't really know. They're my rules. I'm making them up. Before we fight the first abscess of the game, we try to get a fourth party member. Our boy Prada doesn't really want anything to do with us. He's gonna stone cold kill us, I guess, and he doesn't like us being that close to him, cause it's just like those fan fictions. He leaves the battle, and we don't recruit him. It's almost a full moon in the game, so I go and try to recruit another Prada. He takes some of my money, he takes some of my mana, and just like that, he joins the squad. Now that we've got a full team of 4, I decide to take on the Abscess. If you're not really sure what these things are, they're basically these big ass red tentacle things that stick around the map everywhere. Whenever you clear them, you get access to more miracles, and oftentimes you can more easily access the area that they're like summoning all these demons in. Typically speaking, it's more of like a mini boss fight. Some of them are kind of hard. This one being the first one in the game, it's not too hard. We activate our Magitsuhi critical attack, and before too long, the fight is ours. This allows us access to quite a few strong early game miracles. And from there, we continue on our quest. We do stop by the train tracks to talk to a good friend, and we talk about how our other friend was taken by an angel, and how we are trying to find him. And so, our journey to Tokyo Tower continues. Along our way, we come across one of the first side quests in the game that's going to cause us to make a decision. In this case, it's either siding with Apsaris and her little colony over here, or later on in the level, which we'll see, we can side with Lenan Shi, which, by the way, I looked up. Apparently that is an Irish folklore type deal. I had no idea how to pronounce that name. I thought it was like Lenan and then Sidhi or something. Apparently, and I could be wrong, it's pronounced Lenan Shi. So if you've been wondering, that's how it's pronounced. Now, spoiler alert, we do side with Apsaris because she is very useful for fighting the Hydra in a little bit. However, you can pick either side, and I actually really like these quests in SMT5, for as much as the main story tends to not go very far into anything, typically, these side quests that you actually get to pick a decision that affects something, they are quite fun, and also an interesting way to write side quests. At this point, it's a good time to spend some of the glory that we picked up along the train tracks. We get Art of Essences 1, along with Divine Proficiency. This will not only give our main character one more skill slot, but will also allow him to learn more skills from essences. Essentially, how Essence Fusion works is early on, you only have access to the first skills, and as you get more miracles, you can actually access the later ones. For this exact reason, we can now get all of the main elements on our main character, and for a magic build, this is pretty important. And for good measure, I end up throwing on a healing spell as well. Then we see a big ass scary rock guy. You don't want to fight him at this point in the game, he will one-shot you and your entire team. We also, at this point, have access to Amada Zako, who is following us around. She is the first quest navigator that you get in the game, and essentially what happens is every once in a while, you'll see a little thing on the map, and she'll run over and say, "Yo, here's an item, come pick it up." Every once in a while, unfortunately, that will lead you into getting ambushed by an enemy. However, a lot of times those enemies end up being Mitamas, which can give you a lot of XP, a lot of money, a lot of glory, just good stuff in general. Sometimes you can absolutely just get boned though, so watch out for that. Speaking of Mitamas, here's a great example of one. This was a situation where she found an item, however, unfortunately for us, it was a battle, but fortunately for us, it was a Mitama. Most of the time, if they go first, they will escape, meaning that you will not be able to actually kill them, but what you want to do is throw a spyglass at them. Now, you throw the spyglass at them, and this will reveal their weakness. In this case, it was a fire weakness. I use a fire spell on my main character to finish him off, and thankfully I get quite a bit of XP, a decent bit of money, and this specific Mitama was actually one that drops relics, which can be sold to the shopkeeper Gustav and make some decent profit. The next thing on our to-do list is to eliminate this abscess here. This will be the Mermaid Boss fight, or mini-boss if you really want to consider it that. This was potentially going to be a slight wall in our playthrough, but we ended up having a pretty decent team to take her down with. Mermaid is thankfully weak to both fire and electric attacks, so in my case I had fire and electric on my main character, as well as having a Mandrake, which knew the electric spell Zio, so I could exploit the weakness even further. Thankfully, none of my team had a weakness to ice, so with my Magitsuhi critical attack, I was able to really pile on the damage and eventually take her down without much hassle. After the boss fight, we end up continuing on to the next Leyline Fountain, and luck would have it that we find another Mitama. This Mitama is actually one that's going to give us glory crystals if we're able to kill it, and thank God the spyglass was able to reveal its weakness. This one was fire as well, and from this fight we end up getting 2 small glory crystals. These are super good this early in the game. That will give us 20 glory overall, and that's pretty solid for the early game. I can go spend that in the World of Shadows pretty easily. You can see me put my stats into magic almost every single level up. This is mostly because, depending on if you want to go a magic or a physical build, the 2 main builds in this game, typically it's good to just heavily invest in either strength or magic, given whichever build you're going for. It's not that the other stats are necessarily bad, but the game does kind of give you stats as you level up automatically, and oftentimes it just balances them out in a nice way. At around this point in the video is when I switch to normal mode. There's a lot of reasons why I do this, but honestly, I'm just kind of interested to see how the game is balanced on normal. I've played the game on hard before, and I think that playing on normal will give me more of an interesting experience. I'll be able to use a lot more demons in more unique ways. I think on hard mode, it's going to sort of shoehorn me into certain playstyles, and it's also going to force me to grind quite a bit. So there's a lot of other reasons. If you want me to explain them, I could, but from here, we are going to be playing on normal. Now, at this point, this area is pretty open to you. There's a lot of stuff to do. Basically, I started running around and completing all of these side quests that I wanted to complete, while also picking up a lot of the treasures nearby and recruiting demons. One of the stops we made, the Preta leader was wondering if we found his boys. We did find his boys, and we did find his sake and his dango medley. Unfortunately, Pretas are unsatiable. In fact, they are never full. So despite the fact that we completed their little quest line, they are still pissed off. We promptly commit mass genocide upon their cave of people, and we move on our merry way. I noticed we had quite a bit of glory sitting around, and I decided to get Divine Garrison 1 and Divine Garrison 2. This will let us have more slots to recruit more demons, so we don't have to let them go to recruit more. After running various errands for demons around the area, we quickly gain a level. Before too long, we gain another level, but at this point, we're running low on side quests and things to get us up to a certain level, and to be honest, I'm not sure at this point if I can tackle the Hydra. The Hydra is the first main boss of the game, and before we get to the Hydra fight, I'd very much like Apsaris' side quest to be done so that she joins my party as a demon. She has a very high magic stat, and she has a strong ice spell. At least a strong enough ice spell, I should say. While she is weak to fire, oftentimes that doesn't matter as much as you would think, despite the fact that the Hydra does have AoE fire moves. I'm also at this point able to recruit a very important demon for the Hydra fight as well, in the form of Azumi. Azumi does not have a weakness to fire, darkness, or physical, and knows ice spells. Additionally, its base level is 11, which means that at least stat-wise, it's going to be better than a lot of the other demons I could be using for that boss fight. You may have saw whenever I was recruiting Azumi that they automatically joined my team whenever I talked to them. This is actually a huge quality of life improvement from previous SMT games that actually prior in the playthrough I had talked to an Azumi, convinced them to join my team, but unfortunately at the time I was level 10. I can't recruit a demon that's a higher level than me, so it said to come back next time and actually it would join my team. As long as you succeed with the negotiation one time, even if you're multiple levels under that demon, that means that you can go back in the future and just immediately recruit them. This is a great change. I love it. Armed with my new teammate Azumi, and hopefully an Apsaris pretty soon, I will feel pretty comfortable going into the Hydra boss fight. At this point, there's not much else left to do other than fight Linan. But before that, I do end up talking to her to hear her side out of the story at least. And this is what I really like about a lot of these side quests where you end up taking a side. Neither side is really right. Both of them are kind of morally gray depending on how you interpret them. Whenever you talk to Linan, she certainly doesn't really seem like the villain. She just wants people to be able to use their talents to their best ability. Whereas Apsaris, she claims, is abusing weaker demons than her to use them as servants. Now, in this situation, regardless, I'm picking Apsaris, but this is just a great example of SMT's classic law versus chaos, and not necessarily either side being 100% correct, and I think side quests like this one really encapsulate this whole idea of the series. Right before the boss fight with Linan, I end up finding a group of 4 red Mitamas. I was overjoyed thinking that I was at least going to kill one of them, and whenever 2 of them fled immediately, I revealed one of their weaknesses and I knew for a fact I could hit it. Now unfortunately, I did not know for a fact I could hit it, because as my main character went to go hit him with a spell, it missed. And because it missed, I was not able to kill any of them. So 4 Mitamas, all of them got away. Kind of hilarious. It would have been a good little bit of XP and Maka. And if I remember correctly, the red Mitamas actually give you the grimoires to level up your demons, which would have been useful later on in the game. But there's no use crying over something that didn't happen, so we end up doing some other stuff in the area just very quickly, finishing up any loose ends before we go and fight Linan, because right after that, our plan is to fight Hydra. For the first fight against Linan, it actually didn't go as badly as I might have thought. I was just mostly trying to scout out how hard the fight was going to be, if I was going to need to prepare more for it, or if I could just jump right in. Unfortunately, she is level 17, and I had nothing that could exploit Ippondatara's weakness, which basically meant that I was boned. Unfortunately, I also completely forgot that Nahabino starts with a weakness to force and darkness, and Linan loves using darkness spells. In fact, she only knows a darkness spell, which gave me a pretty good idea. What I was going to do was change my resistances. Essentially, in SMT5, not only are you able to take skills from essence fusions, but you can actually, once you get the miracle required, take the resistances that that demon has and put them on your main character. You can't do that for other demons, but you can specifically do it for you. So what we do is we go to the world of shadows. We use the daemon essence to switch our resistance to something that's going to be much better. This lets us completely null darkness, which means that if I can get rid of Ippondatara as fast as possible, it's essentially impossible for me to lose the fight. Because if I remembered correctly, the only combat move that Linan actually knows is Mudo, which is a dark spell. And so, with that slight amount of preparation, we go back in for the second fight, and just real quick, this is one of the reasons why I absolutely love the SMT franchise. It's a game that oftentimes you can't just go in and brute force your way through something. Even grinding levels or grinding up to a ridiculous standard doesn't necessarily mean and guarantee you victory. What you have to do is think and strategize about what you're about to do, and once you actually figure it out, it seems almost easy, you know what I mean? You know, a lot of people talk about how hard these games are, but if you stop and kind of figure out the puzzle every now and then, it becomes a lot easier, and I love that aspect of these games. For me personally, a big aspect of that is actually fusing demons. Now, in this playthrough, we're not fusing demons, so that whole thing goes out the window. But regardless, we go back in for attempt number 2, and we absolutely wipe the floor with them. Ippon to Tara goes down relatively easy, and from there, we basically can't lose. Linon is even nice enough to use Mudo on me one time, completely skipping her turn, and as a result, we win the battle. After this, we return to Apsaris and have her join our squad. We have to get rid of one of our demons, unfortunately, to do this, but it's definitely worth it because she is very strong. Now, all the pieces are in play, Exodia has been assembled, and we're ready to fight the Hydra. From here, we experience a short flashback segment. Aogami has remembered some of his memories, and we are treated to a cutscene where some angels are fighting some demons. Towards the end of said cutscene, Lucifer descends from the heavens and claims that he has murdered God. But hey, this is a Shin Megami Tensei game, so it's really not a big deal. Let's just fight the boss. Alright, so without further ado, this has been the boss fight that we've been trying to prepare for this entire area so far. This is definitely the boss that will filter, quote-unquote, a lot of new players if they don't understand the gameplay systems and are just trying to brute force their way through. Now, he is a level 15, so being around that level might be ideal. However, in this attempt, we're actually only level 13, and we're using a lot of low-level demons. Generally speaking, as long as you're playing the fight in a smart manner, you should be able to win, although there are some things that will really help you out in this fight. Number 1, the Hydra is weak to ice. I believe it is his only weakness. So, if you're going to be abusing the press turn system, you definitely want ice spells on pretty much all of your demons, if not every single one. For my playthrough, I was going to be using every single demon with ice spells on my team. Now, for my attempt, I was basically going to use demons with ice spells specifically. Now, one thing about demons with ice spells is that some of them, unfortunately, will end up actually having a weakness to fire. The Hydra, as you might guess, actually spits fire, so it could, in theory, be a problem. But this is where a very important item comes into play. Before going into this battle, we bought some dampeners. Basically, these are consumable items that you can buy at the shop, even from the beginning of the game, that will completely block a source of elemental damage for your whole team for the whole turn. As you might guess, this item is absolutely broken, and it makes a lot of the boss fights in this game potentially kind of a cakewalk, especially on the early side of the game. I found myself in my first hard mode playthrough using them mostly at the beginning to mid game, and then they kind of fell off towards the end. I found myself just attacking more instead of playing defensively. So basically, the Hydra has 3 ways of attacking. He can attack with physical, he can attack with darkness, and he can attack with fire. So what you want to do is buy some dark dampeners, and buy some fire dampeners, and physical dampeners are not available at this point in the game. Those would be absolutely broken at this point, so they don't allow those in the shop. I'm not actually sure if you can ever buy those in the shop. You can find them as items, though. Now, I could use all of my turns to just hit the Hydra with ice spells, but the smarter idea is to cycle through 4 turns hitting him with ice spells, and then use the main character to use a fire dampener. This fire dampener kind of plays 2 roles. Number 1, it protects the entire team from any incoming fire damage, but because of how the press turn system works, if you hit an enemy that is blocking an element, or if it's nulling an element, or whatever, what ends up happening is that they actually lose turns on their side, meaning that in this case, it basically just automatically brings it back to you, and you can have your turn again. This makes this fight very easy in theory. Now, the Hydra doesn't really always do the same thing every single turn. Sometimes he'll throw in some physical attacks, and we don't have a way to block that. But ordinarily, as long as he's not critting you or doing anything crazy, as long as you're using fire dampeners every turn, you should be relatively safe. Now, the second part to this boss fight, and something that you can kind of understand with a lot of bosses in this game, is the Magitsuhi Gauge. Magitsuhi is something I haven't really talked about a lot yet, but it's something really important. It's the gauge that fills up, and essentially once it fills up, you can use a special ability. Depending on the race of your demons, you can basically use different Magitsuhi abilities. The one you start with is absolutely one of the best ones in the game. It's the critical one, so you just do critical moves the entire time. This is pretty crazy, but also, this is the one that bosses tend to use. And by tend to use, I mean literally every boss in the game uses this. So whenever bosses are charging Magitsuhi, typically they are programmed with the AI to do specific things. Oftentimes bosses will have multiple unique abilities, but like their signature unique ability, they'll end up using on a Magitsuhi turn. And what this means is with the Hydra, what he does every single time that he charges up his gauge is that he's going to use his Poison Breath attack. The Poison Breath attack is a dark move, meaning that once we see him charging, we can rinse and repeat what we did on the Fire Dampener turn, except that this time we use a Dark Dampener. What this does is essentially the same thing, completely blocks the attack, and makes it an absolute cakewalk. It gives us our turn back, and we basically just keep cycling through and dealing damage. Now, eventually, towards the end of the Hydra boss fight, he's going to lose some heads, and he's going to start using the move called Frenzy. Frenzy is where this boss fight can kind of be kicked up a notch. While you can keep using the Fire Dampeners at this point in the fight, typically his fire spells are actually weaker, I believe, because he has less heads and stuff, although I'm not sure about that. But there is no way to actually block Frenzy. And so one of the problems you can run into if you're not able to kill him fast enough, or just generally if you get unlucky, his Frenzy attack might wipe out a lot of your team. Additionally, it is an AoE attack, so it has multiple chances to hit a critical hit on one of your team members. If he hits you with a critical hit, and then he follows it up with another Frenzy, you might be in for a rough time. So sometimes you might lose this fight simply due to the fact that the AI on the enemy side just wanted to murder you. However, generally speaking, this fight, if you go in with some of these tips I've given you, is really not that hard of a fight. This fight does become a lot more difficult if you're doing a no dampener run, like if you don't want to use the dampeners at all. But hey, the game gives you access to them, so why not use them? And after using all of these tactical advantages, we are able to take down the Hydra, and the first boss on this playthrough is dealt with. It honestly was a lot easier than I thought it might have been. With the dampeners and basically just abusing the press turn system, we were able to pretty much just slap the boss. He barely did any damage to us, so not too bad. We also got pretty lucky with some of the RNG in that run, so, you know, one run was really all we needed. So after taking down the Hydra, there are just some loose ends to tie up in the area. This does open up the next area that we're going to go to. However, one thing to grab pretty quick is the Glory Orb. It was the one you couldn't see prior in the map, so I grabbed that real quick. And then also, there's a quick cutscene with a character that you'll see a couple more times throughout the game. I don't really know what role he plays at all. He is in the very last area of the game, but he doesn't really say much. My boy Goto, I believe his name is. He's like a monk. He's really cool looking. He gives you essentially what is just like a return to checkpoint item type deal. It has infinite uses. It's really, really useful and saves you a lot of time. Also, it can get you out of some sticky situations. If you are in a rough spot, you can just immediately go back to a save point, essentially, and save real quick. So, that's always a good idea. With that, I think it's about time to probably end the video. We didn't complete the first whole area, but I think this is a pretty good stopping point. Hydra is kind of one of those milestones that a lot of SMT games have. SMT4 had Minotaur, Nocturne had Matador. You know, there's always that one boss at the beginning of the game that really tests you and sees if you understand the game mechanics at play in that particular SMT game. So, this is that for SMT5, and so I figured this is probably a good part to leave it off at. If you liked the video and want to see more, let me know in the comments. I'm probably going to make more anyway, but we'll have to see. I just thought this was an interesting idea. I love this game so much, and figured I'd just make a video about it. So until next time, peace out. Who knows if there'll be a second episode.